My father's champagne glass shattered against the marble floor of what used to be our family's modest farmhouse kitchen. The sound echoed through the now-renovated space with its imported Italian countertops and custom cathedral ceilings that cost more than most people's annual salary. That's impossible, Marina," he stammered, his weathered hands trembling as he stared at the business card I'd just placed on the granite island. "Celestial Dynamics, you can't possibly own an aerospace company. You were just our little farm girl." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Not anymore, Dad. The company that just acquired Thornfield Agricultural Holdings? The one that bought out your precious farm and every piece of land you thought you'd stolen from me? That's mine. And yes, before you ask, I did know exactly whose property I was purchasing when I signed those papers last month. My mother, Helena, stood frozen in the doorway clutching her pearl necklace, the same necklace she'd claimed was a family heirloom, when she convinced me to leave it behind during my dramatic exit 3 years ago. Funny how family heirlooms somehow multiply when insurance settlements come through. Her perfectly Botoxed face couldn't quite manage the shock she was feeling as she took in my tailored Armani suit, the diamond watch that caught the light from the new skylights, and most importantly, the confident smile of a woman who'd built an empire from absolutely nothing. "But sweetie," she whispered, her voice cracking in that manipulative way I'd fallen for countless times before, "when you left Millbrook Creek, you had nothing. We gave you everything we could spare after the unfortunate circumstances with your inheritance. You can't possibly have built something this successful in just 3 years." "Oh, but I had." And the look on my younger brother Connor's face as he walked into the kitchen and saw me standing there, no longer the naive older sister he'd helped manipulate and betray, was absolutely priceless. The same Connor who'd forged documents to steal my grandfather's land inheritance. The same Connor who'd convinced our parents to tell me there was a family emergency requiring my immediate return from my graduate program in Cascade City, only to reveal they'd decided to restructure grandfather's will to better serve the family's needs. "Marina?" Connor's voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here? And why do you look like some kind of businesswoman?" I couldn't help but laugh, a sound that used to be timid and apologetic, but now carried the confidence of someone who'd learned to build rather than beg. "Funny story, Connor. Remember 3 years ago when you all called me home for that supposed emergency? When you told me grandfather's final wishes were to consolidate the family holdings under responsible management, meaning you, because I was too emotional and impractical to handle real estate investments." The color drained from his face as he began to understand exactly what was happening. "Well, it turns out that being forced to start over with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart was the best thing that ever happened to me. See, when you're desperate enough, when you have literally nothing left to lose because your own family has stripped you of everything you thought was yours by birthright, you discover capabilities you never knew existed." I walked slowly around the kitchen island, my heels clicking against the heated marble floors that my money had installed. "That worthless aerospace engineering degree you all mocked. The one you said was a waste of time because I should focus on finding a nice husband instead of chasing impossible dreams? Turns out it was worth about $250 million when I developed and patented a revolutionary satellite guidance system." My father's legs seemed to give out as he sank into one of the new designer bar stools. The same man who'd looked me in the eyes 3 years ago and said, "Marina, sweetheart, you have to understand. Connor has a business degree and practical experience. You're brilliant, but you're a dreamer. Grandfather's land needs someone who understands real-world applications. The emergency call you made," I continued, savoring every word, "the one where Mom was crying about sudden medical bills and financial disasters that required immediate family intervention? I dropped everything. I left my graduate research project that was 3 weeks away from completion. I abandoned the startup accelerator program that had just accepted my preliminary satellite technology proposal. I flew home on the next available flight because I thought my family needed me." Helena's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth as the memory of that orchestrated performance came flooding back. "But there was no emergency, was there? No medical bills, no financial crisis, no desperate family situation. Just a convenient story to get me home so you could present me with paperwork transferring my inheritance to Connor, claiming it was grandfather's updated final wishes that mysteriously surfaced after his death. The silence in the kitchen was deafening except for the soft hum of the new commercial-grade refrigerator. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You want to know the beautiful irony in all of this? I asked, pulling out my phone to show them the real estate acquisition documents. That emergency call that forced me to abandon my research? It actually saved my project. My research advisor was so impressed by my dedication to family that he fast-tracked my prototype through the patent process while I was gone. By the time I returned to find my inheritance stolen and my childhood bedroom cleared out like I'd never existed, I had intellectual property worth more than this entire county. Connor finally found his voice. But how did you know we owned Thornfield Holdings? How did you know to target our company specifically? My smile could have powered the new LED lighting system throughout the house. Oh, Connor. You really think I spent 3 years building a fortune without keeping tabs on the family that betrayed me? Every land acquisition, every business loan, every expansion of your agricultural empire, I've been watching and waiting. See, when you build a technology company in the aerospace industry, you develop some very interesting connections with satellite imaging and property assessment companies. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want you to drop a comment and tell me about a time someone underestimated you. Because what happened next in my journey proves that the biggest mistake people make is assuming that quiet, kind people are weak people. And if you stick around until the end, you'll discover exactly how I turned a family betrayal into a business empire that made my grandfather's farm look like a vegetable garden. Tomorrow, I have another story that'll show you why burning bridges with the wrong people sometimes lights the way to the right path. But first, let me tell you how a desperate phone call led to the most expensive lesson my family ever received. The story I'm about to share proves that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are simply preparing you for the success they could never achieve themselves. So buckle up, because the sweet taste of justice I experienced over the next few hours still makes me smile every single time I remember it. But to understand how I ended up owning my own family's farm and watching them scramble to comprehend their spectacular miscalculation, you need to know how this all began. You need to understand the woman I was before that phone call changed everything, and the empire I built from the ashes of their betrayal. Trust me, this story gets better. 3 years earlier, I was Marina Blackwood, the dutiful daughter who believed family meant everything. I was 26 years old, living in a cramped studio apartment in Cascade City while pursuing my master's degree in aerospace engineering at Meridian Technical University. Every weekend, I'd make the 4-hour drive back to Millbrook Creek in my beat-up Honda Civic, bringing homemade cookies and helping with whatever crisis had emerged on the family farm. Our story began on the rolling hills of Thornfield Farm, 300 acres of prime agricultural land that my grandfather, Samuel Blackwood, had built from nothing after immigrating from Eastern Europe in the 1960s. Grandpa Sam was my hero, a brilliant man who taught me that education and hard work could overcome any obstacle. He'd sit with me for hours on the front porch, pointing at the stars and telling me stories about satellites and space exploration. "Marina, my little star," he'd say in his thick accent, "someday you'll build things that touch the sky. Don't let anyone tell you that girls can't reach for the heavens." While my brother Connor was content to help Dad with the farming operations, I was always different. I'd spend my summers building model rockets and reading astronomy textbooks that Grandpa Sam ordered specially for me from the university bookstore in Cascade City. My room was filled with star charts, physics equations scribbled on notebook paper, and dreams that seemed impossibly big for a farm girl from rural Millbrook Creek. My parents, Victor and Helena, supported my education in the way that practical people do. They were proud but skeptical. "It's wonderful that Marina is so smart," my mother would tell her bridge club friends, "but aerospace engineering? What kind of jobs are there for women in that field? Especially out here in farm country." Dad was more direct. "Education is important, sweetheart, but don't forget where you come from. This land has been good to our family. There's honor in working with your hands and feeding people." They weren't wrong, exactly. But they didn't understand the fire that burned in me every time I looked up at the night sky. They couldn't see that my dreams weren't a rejection of our family legacy, but an expansion of it. Grandpa Sam understood, though. He'd always understood. When I graduated summa cum laude with my bachelor's degree in engineering, the whole family drove to Cascade City for the ceremony. I'll never forget the pride in Grandpa Sam's eyes as I walked across that stage. That night, at dinner, he pulled me aside. "Marina, I want to show you something when we get home," he said quietly. "Something about your future that I've been planning for a long time." That something turned out to be his will, carefully prepared by the family attorney in downtown Millbrook Creek. Grandpa Sam had left me the deed to 2/3 of Thornfield Farm, not because he loved Connor less, but because he recognized that I had dreams that required resources to achieve. "Connor will inherit the farming operation and the homestead," Grandpa Sam explained as we sat in his study, surrounded by farming journals and engineering textbooks that somehow coexisted perfectly. "But you, my little star, you'll inherit the majority of the land value. When you're ready to sell your portion, you'll have enough capital to fund whatever sky-reaching dreams you want to pursue." It was the most generous gift I could imagine, but also terrifying. The responsibility of carrying my grandfather's faith in my potential felt enormous. "What if I fail, Grandpa? What if I'm not as capable as you think I am?" His weathered hand covered mine. "Failure is just delayed success, Marina. The only real failure would be not trying at all." 6 months later, Grandpa Sam suffered a massive heart attack while checking on the cattle in the north pasture. Connor found him at sunset, peaceful but gone. The funeral was everything he would have wanted, simple, filled with stories about his kindness and generosity, and attended by half the county. In the weeks following his death, I threw myself into my graduate studies with renewed determination. Every late night in the lab, every complex equation I solved, every prototype I built was a tribute to the man who'd believed in my impossible dreams. My thesis project, a revolutionary satellite guidance system that could dramatically improve GPS accuracy, was progressing better than I'd ever hoped. Connor, meanwhile, had stepped seamlessly into managing the farm operations. He'd always been the practical one, good with numbers and comfortable with the business side of agriculture. My parents were thrilled to see him taking charge, expanding operations, and talking about modernizing equipment. "It's so wonderful to see Connor growing into his role," Helena would gush during our weekly phone calls. "He has such vision for expanding the farm. Did you know he's already talking to investors about organic certification and direct-to-consumer sales?" I was happy for Connor's success, truly. It meant I could focus on my studies without guilt about abandoning the family business. We each had our paths, and they seemed to complement each other perfectly. My life had a comfortable rhythm, intense academic work during the week, weekend visits home to help with whatever Connor needed, and evening phone calls with my parents who were endlessly curious about my research. They didn't understand the technical details, but they loved hearing about my progress. "Professor Williams says my guidance system could revolutionize precision agriculture applications," I'd tell them excitedly. "Imagine being able to optimize crop irrigation down to individual square feet of farmland." "That sounds amazing, sweetheart," Dad would respond. "Maybe someday you can use it to help Connor make the farm even more efficient." I lived in a world where family loyalty and personal ambition felt perfectly aligned. Connor was building our agricultural legacy, I was pushing the boundaries of technology, and we all supported each other's dreams. The land Grandpa Sam had left me felt like a safety net that allowed me to take bigger risks with my career. During my graduate program, I'd been accepted into an exclusive startup accelerator in Cascade City. My satellite guidance technology had caught the attention of several aerospace companies, and I was 3 weeks away from completing the prototype that would determine whether I'd receive funding from my own company. The future felt infinite with possibility. I had my grandfather's land inheritance as collateral, a potentially revolutionary technology, and a family that supported my ambitions. My biggest concern was whether to accept a corporate job offer or risk everything on starting my own company. I was naive enough to believe that family meant unconditional support, that blood was thicker than opportunity, and that the people who'd raised me would celebrate my success rather than resent it. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I missed. The way Connor's questions about my research became more detailed and business-focused. How my parents started asking more frequently about the value of my technology and whether it would be financially successful. The subtle shift from encouraging my dreams to analyzing their profitability. But at the time, their interest felt like love. I thought they were finally understanding that my path, while different from theirs, could still honor our family's legacy. I had no idea that my success was about to become their opportunity, and that the phone call that would change everything was just weeks away. Family loyalty, I thought, meant supporting each other's dreams. I was about to learn that for some people, family loyalty means claiming ownership of those dreams when they become valuable enough to steal. The first red flag appeared during what I thought was a routine family dinner conversation. I'd called home to share exciting news about my prototype testing results when Connor answered the phone instead of Mom, which was unusual since he rarely bothered with family phone calls. Marina. Perfect timing, he said, his voice carrying an enthusiasm that felt slightly forced. I was just telling Mom and Dad about this interesting conversation I had with Jake Morrison at the feed store. You remember Jake, right? His cousin works for some big tech company in Silicon Valley. I shifted my phone to my other ear while reviewing satellite data on my laptop. Yeah, I remember Jake. What about him? Well, apparently his cousin mentioned that GPS technology patents are worth millions of dollars these days. Isn't that wild? I mean, who knew that satellite stuff could be so valuable? Connor's laugh sounded strangely calculated. Makes me wonder what your little project might be worth someday. Something in his tone made me pause my research. Connor, it's not a little project. This is cutting-edge aerospace technology that could revolutionize precision navigation systems across multiple industries. Right. Of course. I didn't mean to diminish it, he backtracked quickly. I'm just curious about the business side, you know? Like, if your research works out, would you license it to companies or start your own business? And what kind of money are we talking about? The conversation felt oddly transactional for a family chat, but I attributed it to Connor's natural business mindset. After all, he'd been handling the farm's financial planning and expansion strategies. It made sense that he'd think in terms of market value and profit potential. I'm still weighing my options, I said carefully. The startup accelerator has been incredible, and Professor Williams thinks I should consider launching my own company rather than licensing to an existing corporation. Your own company? The interest in Connor's voice was unmistakable. That's ambitious. Would you need significant capital investment for something like that? Well, yes. Startup costs for aerospace technology can be substantial, but I have some resources available if I decide to go that route. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. Resources? Connor, you know about Grandpa Sam's inheritance. The land he left me provides collateral options if I need to secure business loans or investment capital. Another pause, followed by what sounded like muffled conversation in the background before Connor returned to the phone. Oh right, the inheritance. That's smart planning on Grandpa's part. Hey, speaking of which, have you had a chance to review all the estate documents recently? Mom was asking about some paperwork details. The question struck me as odd. What kind of paperwork details? Just boring legal stuff. You know how Mom gets about having all the I's dotted and T's crossed. She wanted to make sure everything was properly filed with the county records office. I frowned at my laptop screen. Connor, Grandpa's attorney, handled all of that when the will was probated. Everything should be completely finalized. Of course. Mom's just being Mom, you know? Always worrying about details. His laugh sounded forced again. Anyway, I should let you get back to your important space work. But Marina? Maybe next time you're home, we could sit down and talk more about your business plans? As a family, I mean. We'd love to understand better how we might be able to support your success. After I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the conversation. Connor had never shown much interest in the technical aspects of my work, and his sudden curiosity about patent values and business plans felt strangely pointed. But I pushed the concern aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. The second warning sign came 2 weeks later during my monthly visit home. I arrived Friday evening to find Connor and Dad deep in conversation at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and documents. When I walked in, they quickly gathered everything into a folder. "Marina. We didn't expect you until later," Dad said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I finished my lab work early and decided to surprise everyone." I glanced at the hastily assembled paperwork. "What were you two working on? Farm business?" "Just boring financial planning stuff," Connor answered quickly. "Reviewing some property assessments and expansion possibilities. Nothing that would interest you." But as Connor slid the folder into a briefcase, I caught a glimpse of letterhead that looked distinctly legal rather than agricultural. The brief glimpse showed what appeared to be estate planning documents, which seemed strange since our family's estate planning should have been completely settled after Grandpa's death. During dinner, the conversation kept steering toward my research progress and timeline for completion. Mom asked detailed questions about when I expected to file my final patents, when I might graduate, and what my immediate post-graduation plans involved. "It's just so exciting, sweetheart," she said, refilling my wine glass. "We want to make sure we understand everything so we can properly celebrate your achievements. This technology of yours really could change everything for you, couldn't it?" "Potentially, yes. If the prototype testing continues to show positive results and I can secure proper funding, this could be the foundation for a very successful company." Dad leaned forward. "And you mentioned that your inheritance could help with startup capital. That was really forward-thinking of Grandpa Sam, wasn't it? Giving you the resources to pursue your dreams." Again, the focus on the inheritance felt strangely pointed. "Dad, you and Connor will benefit from the farm's success too. Grandpa Sam structured everything so we could all pursue our strengths." Of course," Dad agreed quickly. "We're just so proud of how you're honoring his memory by using his gift to build something meaningful." The third warning sign was the most unsettling. I'd left my laptop open on the kitchen counter while helping Mom with dinner preparations when I noticed Connor studying my screen with unusual intensity. When he realized I was watching him, he stepped back with an embarrassed laugh. "Sorry, I was just curious about all those graphs and charts. Your work looks incredibly complex." "Connor, those are confidential research files. I know your family, but this technology isn't public information yet." "Oh, absolutely. I wasn't trying to pry. I just find it fascinating that my sister is working on something so revolutionary." He gestured at the screen full of satellite trajectory calculations and GPS accuracy algorithms. "Do you think this could have applications beyond aerospace? Like, could it be used for precision agriculture or land surveying?" The question was surprisingly sophisticated for someone who'd never shown interest in technology applications. "Actually, yes. The guidance system could revolutionize precision farming techniques." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about how versatile the technology might be. It sounds like it could be valuable across multiple industries." That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I couldn't stop thinking about the pattern of conversations. The repeated focus on patent values, inheritance resources, and business applications felt like more than casual family interest. But every time I tried to identify what exactly was bothering me, I talked myself out of my concerns. These were my parents and brother. They'd supported my education, celebrated my achievements, and encouraged my dreams. If they were asking detailed questions about my work, it was because they cared about my success and wanted to understand something that was clearly important to me. The fourth warning sign came in the form of a voicemail from our family attorney, Mr. Henderson, asking me to call him about some questions regarding your grandfather's estate that have come up. When I called back, his secretary said he'd stepped out but would return my call soon. He never did. When I mentioned the call to Mom during our weekly check-in, she seemed flustered. "Oh, that's probably just some routine paperwork filing. You know how attorneys are about documentation. I'm sure it's nothing urgent." But the combination of Connor's sudden interest in my technology's commercial value, the mysterious legal documents, Dad's pointed questions about my inheritance, and an attorney who wouldn't return my calls created a growing sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. Something was happening behind the scenes of my family's supportive facade, but I couldn't imagine what it might be. After all, we were family. We supported each other's dreams and celebrated each other's successes. I had no idea that my dreams were about to become their opportunity, and that my trust was about to become their weapon. The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night while I was running final stress tests on my satellite guidance prototype. I was 3 weeks away from my thesis defense and 2 weeks away from presenting to potential investors at the Startup Accelerators Showcase event. Everything was finally coming together perfectly. My phone buzzed with Mom's ringtone, and my heart immediately dropped. Late-night calls from family never brought good news. I grabbed the phone, expecting to hear about an accident or medical emergency. "Marina, honey, thank God you answered." Mom's voice was shaking, filled with the kind of raw panic that makes your blood run cold. "You need to come home immediately. Something terrible has happened." I was already reaching for my car keys before she finished the sentence. "Mom, what's wrong? Is Dad okay? Did something happen to Connor?" "Your father, he's had some kind of episode. We don't know if it's his heart or..." "Marina, the doctors aren't sure he's going to make it through the night." Her sob was so convincing, so genuinely heartbroken, that I felt my own tears start falling. "I'm coming right now." "Which hospital? Should I meet you there?" No, we're bringing him home. The doctors said he wanted to be on the farm if this is the end." "Marina, he's been asking for you. He keeps saying he needs to talk to you about something important before." Another sob cut off her words. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Mom, I'll be there in 4 hours. Less if traffic is light. Tell Dad to hold on, okay? Tell him I'm coming. Please drive safely, sweetheart. We can't lose both of you in one night." I threw essentials into a backpack, left a note for my roommate, and called Professor Williams to explain I'd have a family emergency and might miss our meeting the next morning. He was incredibly understanding, telling me to take all the time I needed and that we could reschedule everything. The drive from Cascade City to Millbrook Creek had never felt longer. I drove through the night in a state of pure terror, calling home every hour for updates. Each time, Mom or Connor would answer with increasingly grim reports about Dad's condition, but they always assured me he was hanging on, waiting for me to arrive. "He's stable for now," Connor told me around 3 a.m. "But Marina, the doctors are saying the next few hours are critical. He's been drifting in and out of consciousness, but every time he wakes up, he asks if you're here yet." I pushed my Honda Civic harder than it had ever been pushed, taking curves on country roads at dangerous speeds because the thought of Dad dying before I could say goodbye was unbearable. He'd been my rock through everything: college applications, graduate school stress, career decisions. The idea of a world without his steady presence was incomprehensible. I pulled into the farm's gravel driveway as the sun was rising, my eyes red from crying and my entire body exhausted from the emotional trauma of the drive. But as I approached the house, something felt off. The usual signs of a medical emergency, ambulances, medical equipment, family friends gathering to offer support, were completely absent. Instead, Connor's truck and Dad's pickup were parked normally in their usual spots. No medical vehicles, no emergency activity, no sense of crisis at all. For a moment, I wondered if I'd missed something, if they'd already taken Dad to the hospital despite what Mom had said. I rushed through the front door calling out, "Mom? Connor? How is Dad? Did something change?" What I found was my entire family sitting calmly around the kitchen table with steaming coffee cups and a spread of legal documents. Dad was not only alive and well, but he was wearing his favorite flannel shirt and looked like he'd gotten a full night's sleep. The color in his cheeks was healthy, his breathing was normal, and he showed no signs of any medical distress whatsoever. The confusion hit me like a physical blow. "Dad? What? I don't understand. Mom said you were dying. She said the doctors thought you might not make it through the night." The look that passed between my parents and Connor lasted only a second, but it was long enough for me to recognize something I'd never seen before in my family's interactions: coordination. Planned coordination. Sit down, Marina, Dad said gently, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. We need to have a family discussion. A family discussion? My voice cracked with exhaustion and confusion. Dad, I just drove 4 hours through the night because I thought you were dying. I abandoned my research project, missed important meetings, and terrified myself sick thinking I might lose you. What kind of family discussion requires lying about a medical emergency? Mom reached across the table as if to comfort me, but I pulled my hands away. Sweetheart, we're sorry about the urgency, but this really is an emergency. Just a different kind of emergency than we initially explained. What are you talking about? Connor cleared his throat and slid a folder across the table toward me. Marina, we've discovered some serious problems with Grandpa Sam's estate planning. Problems that affect your inheritance and put the entire farm at risk. I stared at the folder without opening it. What kind of problems? Mr. Henderson handled everything perfectly when Grandpa died. The will was clear, the probate was straightforward, and everything was legally finalized. That's what we thought too, Dad said, his tone taking on the patient quality he used when explaining farming concepts to city visitors. But it turns out there were some complications that Mr. Henderson missed. Legal complications that could invalidate parts of the will if we don't address them immediately. My exhaustion was rapidly being replaced by a growing sense of dread. What kind of complications? Connor opened the folder and pulled out several documents that looked official but somehow wrong. Apparently, the way Grandpa structured the land inheritance creates significant tax liabilities that none of us anticipated. The county assessor has revalued the property, and the inheritance taxes on your portion alone would bankrupt the entire operation. That's impossible. Inheritance tax laws haven't changed since Grandpa died, and Mr. Henderson specifically structured everything to minimize tax implications. Marina, Mom's voice took on that gentle but firm tone she'd used when I was a child and needed to accept disappointing news. We've spent the last several weeks consulting with tax attorneys and estate planning specialists. The unanimous recommendation is that we need to restructure the inheritance immediately to protect everyone's interests. I finally opened the folder and began scanning the documents. What I saw made my stomach drop into my shoes. These weren't corrections to Grandpa Sam's will. These were completely new documents that transferred my land inheritance entirely to Connor, leaving me with a small cash settlement that was a fraction of the property's actual value. This isn't restructuring, I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. This is replacement. You're asking me to sign away everything Grandpa Sam left me. The silence that followed was deafening. In that silence, I finally understood why Connor had been asking detailed questions about my research timeline, why Mom wanted to know about my patent filing schedule, and why Dad had been so interested in my startup capital requirements. They'd been calculating. They'd been planning. And they'd been waiting for the perfect moment when I was close enough to success that my inheritance would seem expendable, but not so successful that I wouldn't need their approval or support. Marina, Connor said carefully, we know this is difficult. But think about it practically. Your technology research is about to make you independently wealthy. You don't really need farmland when you're going to be running an aerospace company. This way, we can keep the farm operational while you pursue your dreams without being tied down to agricultural property management. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only were they stealing my inheritance, but they were reframing it as doing me a favor. Get out, I whispered. Marina, please let us explain, Mom started. Get out. I screamed, standing so abruptly that my chair toppled backward. All of you, get out of this house right now. But even as I said it, I realized the horrible truth. This wasn't my house anymore. If I signed those documents, it never would be again. And if I didn't sign them, I was about to discover exactly what my family was capable of when their gentle guidance failed to achieve their goals. Marina, you're being dramatic, Connor said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he'd perfected over years of treating me like the impractical dreamer of the family. Nobody's trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect the family's interests, including yours. I stood there in my childhood kitchen, surrounded by the same yellow wallpaper I'd grown up with, the same wooden table where I'd done homework and shared family meals, and realized I was looking at strangers. These people who'd raised me, who I'd trusted with my deepest dreams and fears, were systematically dismantling my future with the casual efficiency of a business transaction. Protect my interests. I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to make my own throat hurt. By stealing everything Grandpa Sam left me? Dad's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Gone was the gentle farmer who'd taught me to drive the tractor and cheered at my graduation. In his place sat a man calculating profit margins and risk assessments. Marina, you need to understand something about the real world. Sentiment doesn't pay bills or maintain property. Your grandfather was a wonderful man, but he made an emotional decision when he structured that will. An emotional decision? I could barely breathe through my rage. He left me that land because he believed in my potential. Because he wanted me to have the resources to pursue my dreams. And look how that turned out, Mom interjected, her voice carrying a sharp edge I'd never heard directed at me. You've spent years and thousands of dollars on an education that might never amount to anything practical. Meanwhile, Connor has been building something real, something sustainable. The casual dismissal of everything I'd worked for hit like a physical blow. Might never amount to anything? Mom, I'm 3 weeks away from completing technology that could revolutionize satellite navigation. I have investors lined up, patent applications filed, and professors calling my work groundbreaking. Connor leaned back in his chair with an expression of patient skepticism. Marina, let's be honest about what you actually have. You have a prototype that works in laboratory conditions and some theoretical applications that sound impressive to academics. But you don't have a business, you don't have proven market demand, and you certainly don't have guaranteed success. So you're gambling the family's financial security on your space fantasies, Dad added, his tone growing more dismissive with each word. While Connor has spent the last 3 years building real value in agricultural operations that actually feed people and generate consistent income. I stared at him in disbelief. Gambling? Dad, this technology has applications in precision agriculture that could revolutionize farming. It could help Connor's operations become more efficient and profitable. Could, might, maybe, Connor said, waving his hand dismissively. Marina, I love you, but you've always been a dreamer. Remember when you were 12 and convinced you were going to build a rocket to Mars? Or when you spent an entire summer trying to invent a perpetual motion machine? The comparison was so unfair, so deliberately cruel, that it took my breath away. Connor, I was a child then. I'm now a graduate student with a master's degree in aerospace engineering working on technology that has real commercial applications. Working on technology that might have commercial applications, Mom corrected. Sweetheart, we're not trying to hurt your feelings, but we need to be realistic. Connor has proven himself as a businessman. He's expanded the farm's operations by 30%, secured contracts with 3 major distributors, and increased our annual revenue significantly. While you've been spending money on equipment and research that might never generate a single dollar of income, Dad added. We supported your education because we love you, but at some point, we have to consider the practical implications of continuing to subsidize uncertain ventures. The word subsidize hit me like a slap. Subsidize? You mean Grandpa Sam's inheritance? The land he specifically left to me? Connor pulled out another document from the folder. Marina, this is a detailed financial analysis of what your inheritance is actually costing the family operation. Property taxes, maintenance costs, opportunity costs of land that could be used for productive agriculture. Your portion of the estate is actually a financial drain on the farm's profitability. I looked at the spreadsheet he'd prepared, filled with calculations that somehow transformed my grandfather's generous gift into a burden on the family business. This is insane. You're treating Grandpa's will like a hostile takeover. We're treating it like the business decision it should have been, Dad said firmly. Your grandfather loved you, Marina, but love doesn't qualify someone to make sound financial decisions. He was thinking with his heart, not his head. The casual dismissal of Grandpa Sam's judgment felt like they were erasing his memory along with his wishes. So you've decided that his final wishes don't matter because they don't serve your business interests. We've decided that the family's long-term security matters more than one person's sentimental attachment to arrangements that aren't working, Mom said, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when ending arguments. Marina, you're 26 years old. You're smart, you're capable, and you have your whole life ahead of you. But you don't need to cling to farmland to prove your worth. Unlike Connor, who apparently does need farmland to prove his worth. Connor's jaw tightened. I've proven my worth by actually building something sustainable instead of chasing academic theories. I've been here, Marina. While you've been playing with satellites and equations, I've been solving real problems and creating real value. Playing with satellites? I could barely speak through my fury. Connor, my playing has attracted interest from aerospace companies that want to license my technology. My playing has professors recommending me for positions with NASA contractors. My playing could be worth millions of dollars. Could be, Dad emphasized. But Connor's work already is worth something concrete. He's taken the farm from barely breaking even to generating serious profit. He's turned this property into a real business instead of just a family legacy. The implicit message was clear: Connor's practical contributions mattered more than my theoretical potential. My years of education, research, and innovation were just expensive hobbies compared to his concrete agricultural achievements. So this is really about money, I said quietly. You're stealing my inheritance because Connor's business expansion needs capital, and my success would make me independent of family approval. We're restructuring family assets to maximize everyone's benefit, Mom corrected, as if calling theft by a different name made it acceptable. Marina, you'll receive fair compensation for your portion of the estate, plus you'll be free to pursue your career without being tied down to property management responsibilities. Fair compensation? I looked at the cash settlement amount again. This is about 15% of what the land is actually worth. Connor shrugged. Property values are speculative. That settlement reflects the land's actual productive value after accounting for taxes, maintenance costs, and market risks. I realized they prepared for every objection I might raise. They'd calculated not just how to steal my inheritance, but how to make me feel unreasonable for objecting to the theft. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? I asked. All those questions about my research timeline, my graduation date, my business plans, you were figuring out when I'd be most vulnerable to manipulation. We've been planning how to protect the family's interests, Dad said without a trace of shame. Including your interests, whether you're mature enough to recognize them or not. And there it was. The final insult. I wasn't just being robbed, I was being told it was for my own good, and that I was too immature to understand how generous they were being. Looking at their faces, calm, resolved, and completely comfortable with their betrayal, I realized I'd never actually known these people at all. Marina, you have 48 hours to review these documents and make your decision, Connor said, sliding a pen across the table toward me with the casual confidence of someone who believed they held all the cards. After that, we'll have to pursue alternative legal remedies to protect the family's interests. The threat was delivered so smoothly, wrapped in such reasonable language, that it took me a moment to recognize it for what it was: extortion. Alternative legal remedies? What does that mean? Dad exchanged a look with Connor before answering. It means we've consulted with attorneys about the legal complexities surrounding your grandfather's estate. There are several grounds on which the current will could be challenged if necessary. My blood went cold. Challenged how? Connor pulled out yet another folder, this one thicker than the first. Marina, we've discovered some concerning irregularities in how Grandpa Sam's will was executed. Questions about his mental competency at the time of signing, potential undue influence, and procedural errors in the documentation process. That's a lie. My voice was barely above a whisper. Grandpa Sam was completely lucid when he updated his will. Mr. Henderson had him evaluated by 2 independent physicians to ensure there could never be any question about his mental state. Actually, Mom said, her voice taking on that patient tone she used when correcting my childhood misconceptions, we found some medical records that suggest Grandpa was experiencing more cognitive decline than any of us realized at the time. Early-stage dementia can be very subtle, sweetie. I stared at her in horror. Mom, that's completely false. Grandpa Sam was sharp as a tack right up until his heart attack. You know that. We all know that. Dad opened the thick folder and pulled out what appeared to be medical documents. These records from Dr. Pemberton's office show that Grandpa was being treated for memory issues and confusion during the months before he updated his will. The family wasn't informed because of patient confidentiality laws, but now that we're pursuing legal action, these records have become available. I grabbed the documents and scanned them quickly. They looked official, complete with letterhead from Dr. Pemberton's medical practice and detailed notes about cognitive assessments and memory concerns. But something felt wrong about them. The dates, the language, the way the symptoms were described seemed too convenient, too perfectly aligned with their legal strategy. This is impossible, I said, my hands shaking as I held the papers. I spent hours with Grandpa Sam during those exact months. We discussed complex engineering concepts, reviewed my research, talked about business strategies for my future company. He was completely coherent. Connor's expression was sympathetic but firm. Marina, people with early dementia can have good days and bad days. They can seem perfectly normal in familiar settings while struggling with complex decision-making. The fact that you didn't notice the decline doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Besides, Mom added gently, you were so focused on your studies and research. You only visited on weekends, and mostly you talked about your own projects. You might not have been paying attention to subtle changes in his cognitive function. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Not only was I losing my inheritance, but I was being painted as too self-absorbed to notice my beloved grandfather's supposed decline. They were systematically destroying not just my financial future, but my memories of our relationship. Even if these medical records are legitimate, I said desperately, Grandpa's attorney had him evaluated independently. Mr. Henderson would never have allowed a will to be executed if there were any questions about mental competency. Dad's expression grew more serious. That's another concerning aspect of this situation, Marina. We've discovered that Mr. Henderson may have had financial incentives to expedite the will's execution without proper due diligence. Connor nodded gravely. It turns out that Grandpa Sam had promised Henderson a significant bonus for completing the estate planning quickly. There's evidence suggesting the attorney may have cut corners on the competency evaluation to secure his payment. What evidence? I demanded. Dad pulled out another set of documents. Payment records showing Henderson received $25,000 from Grandpa's account immediately after the will was signed. That's far more than standard legal fees for estate planning services. I looked at the bank records, and my heart sank. The payment was real, documented in black and white. But I knew there had to be an explanation that didn't involve legal misconduct. Maybe Grandpa paid extra because he wanted the work done quickly, or maybe it covered other legal services. Maybe, Mom said with a sad smile. But combined with the medical evidence of cognitive decline, it creates a pattern that any court would find concerning. The question becomes whether we address these irregularities as a family, or whether we have to involve the legal system to protect everyone's interests. The full scope of their planning was becoming clear. They hadn't just decided to steal my inheritance, they'd constructed an entire legal framework to justify the theft. Medical records, payment documentation, procedural concerns, they'd covered every angle. This is all fabricated, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. The documents looked so official, so detailed, so thoroughly prepared. You're creating false evidence to steal my grandfather's land. Connor's expression shifted to something resembling pity. Marina, I know this is difficult to accept. When someone we love suffers from cognitive decline, it's natural to deny the signs we missed. But the evidence is overwhelming. The choice is simple, Dad continued. You can accept the restructured inheritance arrangement, which provides you with fair compensation while protecting the family farm's operational integrity. Or we can proceed with a full legal challenge to the will's validity, which would likely invalidate the entire document and leave everything in probate for years. Mom leaned forward with manufactured concern. Sweetie, if we have to go to court, the legal fees alone would consume most of the estate's value. None of us would benefit, and Grandpa's memory would be dragged through a very public and painful process. Plus, Connor added with calculated precision, a legal challenge would require extensive documentation of your financial dependence on the inheritance for your business plans. Any potential investors or partners would see you as embroiled in family litigation over mental competency issues. That kind of controversy rarely attracts serious funding. The final piece of their strategy clicked into place. They weren't just threatening to steal my inheritance, they were threatening to destroy my reputation and credibility in the aerospace industry. Any mention of legal challenges involving mental competency and financial disputes would make me untouchable to potential investors or employers. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I said quietly. We've thought about protecting the family, Dad replied. All of the family, including you. This isn't about punishment, Marina. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone. But I could see the truth in their eyes. This wasn't about family protection or fair solutions. This was about power, control, and the systematic elimination of any threat to their plans. They'd calculated every angle, prepared for every objection, and constructed a legal maze designed to make resistance impossible. And the most devastating part was that they were probably right. Fighting them would cost me everything, my inheritance, my reputation, my research timeline, and possibly my entire future in aerospace technology. They'd weaponized my love for Grandpa Sam against me, turning my grief into their legal justification and my dreams into their leverage. Looking at their confident faces, I realized they'd been planning this destruction for months, maybe years. Every supportive conversation, every encouraging word, every expression of family pride had been a lie designed to keep me vulnerable until they were ready to strike. I was completely, utterly, and systematically destroyed. I signed the papers at 2:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, sitting alone in my childhood bedroom with nothing but a desk lamp illuminating the documents that would strip away everything my grandfather had wanted me to have. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen, but the alternative, watching them destroy Grandpa Sam's memory through fabricated medical records and attorney misconduct allegations, was unthinkable. The cash settlement they gave me was exactly $47,000. After taxes and the attorney fees they insisted I pay for processing the restructured inheritance, I walked away with $31,000. $31,000 for land worth over $300,000. The math was so obscene it felt surreal. You're making the right choice, sweetheart, Mom had whispered as I signed the final page, her hand briefly touching my shoulder in what might have been meant as comfort but felt like a pat from an executioner. You'll see. This will free you to pursue your dreams without being tied down to property management. But my dreams were dying along with everything else. The family emergency that had brought me home had cost me 3 crucial weeks of research time, missing my final prototype testing window and causing me to forfeit my presentation slot at the Startup Accelerator Showcase. Professor Williams had been understanding but realistic when I finally called him from the farm. Marina, I'm truly sorry about your family situation, he'd said, his voice carrying the careful distance of someone delivering bad news. But the accelerator program operates on very strict timelines. Missing the showcase presentation means losing your spot in the current cohort, and there's a 2-year waiting list for the next opening. 2 years. In the rapidly evolving world of aerospace technology, 2 years might as well have been a lifetime. By the time I could reapply, newer innovations would have made my satellite guidance system obsolete, or someone else would have developed similar technology and captured the market opportunity. The drive back to Cascade City was the longest 4 hours of my life. My Honda Civic, which had seemed like reliable transportation just days earlier, now felt like a rolling confession of failure. Every mile marker was a reminder that I was returning to my graduate student life with nothing to show for my sacrifice except a checking account that wouldn't even cover a full year's living expenses. My studio apartment, which had felt cozy and sufficient when I'd left for the farm, now seemed claustrophobic and pathetic. The walls were covered with aerospace industry posters and satellite photographs that had once inspired me but now felt like mockery. The desk where I'd spent countless hours developing revolutionary technology looked like a child's play area, littered with equations and prototypes that no longer mattered. The worst part was calling my research advisor to officially withdraw from the accelerator program. Dr. Richardson had invested months of her time mentoring me, helping me refine my technology, and preparing my presentation materials. Her disappointment was palpable even through the phone. "Marina, I have to ask, are you certain this decision is necessary? The work you've done represents genuine breakthrough technology. It seems tragic to abandon it for family financial arrangements that might be negotiable." How could I explain that the family financial arrangements were actually systematic theft orchestrated by people I'd trusted with my life? How could I admit that I'd been manipulated by my own parents and brother into sacrificing my future for their immediate gain? "The family situation is more complex than I initially realized," I said carefully. "I need to focus on immediate financial stability rather than long-term research projects." The lie tasted bitter, but it was simpler than the truth. Within a week, my entire academic and professional network had learned about my withdrawal from the program. In the small world of aerospace research, news traveled fast. Graduate students talked, professors compared notes, and potential employers heard whispers about promising researchers who'd suddenly abandoned cutting-edge projects for mysterious, family reasons. The job interviews that followed were brutal exercises in explaining failure without admitting to family betrayal. How do you tell potential employers that you walked away from breakthrough technology because your family manipulated you into giving up your inheritance? How do you maintain professional credibility while explaining that you're suddenly available because you made catastrophically poor personal decisions? "Ms. Blackwood," said the hiring manager at Stellar Dynamics, one of the few aerospace companies that had initially shown interest in my work, "your academic record is impressive, but we're concerned about your pattern of not following through on commitments. Leaving a research program so close to completion suggests issues with persistence and priority management." It was a family emergency, I repeated for the 100th time, the words feeling more hollow each time I spoke them. "We understand that family situations can be complex," she replied with the practiced sympathy of someone who'd heard every excuse. "But in this industry, we need people who can maintain focus on long-term projects despite personal distractions. Your decision to abandon breakthrough research for family financial issues raises questions about your professional judgment." The rejection letter arrived 3 days later, followed by similar rejections from 6 other companies. My reputation in the aerospace industry was effectively destroyed. I wasn't just unemployed, I was unemployable in the field I'd spent years preparing to enter. My $31,000 inheritance settlement was disappearing with alarming speed. Rent, utilities, food, student loan payments, and job search expenses consumed money faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Within 2 months, I was rationing meals and considering whether to maintain my internet connection or pay my electric bill. The worst moments came late at night when I'd lie in bed calculating how long my remaining money would last. Optimistic scenarios gave me 4 more months before complete financial collapse. Realistic scenarios suggested 2 months. Pessimistic scenarios, the ones that kept me awake until dawn, suggested I was already past the point of recovery. I applied for retail jobs, restaurant positions, anything that would generate immediate income. But even those applications were disasters. Potential employers looked at my graduate degree in aerospace engineering and wondered why I was applying for minimum wage positions. They correctly suspected I'd abandoned the job as soon as something better appeared, making me an unreliable investment even for temporary work. The phone calls from my family during this period were the cruelest torture imaginable. Mom would call weekly with updates about the farms, exciting expansion projects, and Connor's brilliant business strategies. Dad would share stories about their new equipment purchases and land development plans. They spoke with the enthusiasm of people who'd solved all their problems and couldn't understand why I seemed so subdued. "Marina, you sound tired," Mom would say with manufactured concern. "Are you taking care of yourself? Remember, this transition period is temporary. Once you get settled in your new career path, you'll appreciate the freedom from property management responsibilities." Freedom. They called my financial desperation and professional exile freedom. The final blow came when I received notice that my student loan payments were delinquent. The federal loan servicer didn't care about family betrayals or career setbacks. They wanted their monthly payments, and my dwindling bank account couldn't provide them. As I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, rejection letters from potential employers, and bank statements showing my approaching financial collapse, I realized I'd lost everything that mattered: my inheritance, my research, my career prospects, my financial security, and most devastatingly, my faith in family bonds. At 26 years old, I was completely alone, professionally destroyed, and facing homelessness within weeks. The family that had raised me to believe in hard work and education had systematically dismantled everything I'd built through hard work and education. I had reached the absolute bottom, with nowhere left to fall. The eviction notice was taped to my apartment door on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 3 months after I'd signed away my inheritance. The bright orange paper fluttered in the autumn wind like a flag of surrender, informing me that I had 7 days to pay $2,847 in back rent or face legal removal from the premises. I stood in the hallway holding that notice, wearing the same clothes I'd slept in for the 3rd consecutive night, and felt something inside me finally break. Not my spirit, that had been systematically destroyed months ago. What broke was my willingness to accept defeat gracefully. For 3 months, I'd been the victim of circumstances beyond my control, the casualty of family betrayal, the unfortunate graduate student whose dreams had been sacrificed for other people's ambitions. I'd internalized their narrative that I was impractical, overly emotional, and incapable of making sound decisions. I'd accepted that my aerospace research was worthless fantasy compared to Connor's agricultural pragmatism. But standing in that hallway, facing homelessness in 7 days, I had a moment of startling clarity. I wasn't a victim of circumstances beyond my control. I was a victim of my own willingness to believe people who had systematically lied to me. The satellite guidance technology I'd abandoned wasn't worthless fantasy. It was revolutionary innovation that I'd spent years developing. The research I'd walked away from wasn't impractical dreaming. It was breakthrough science that Professor Williams had called industry-changing, before my family manipulated me into abandoning it. I wasn't too emotional or impractical to make sound decisions. I was too trusting to recognize manipulation when it came from people who were supposed to love me. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my laptop and reviewed my research files. All of my satellite guidance work was still there: algorithms, test results, performance data, patent application drafts. None of it had disappeared when I withdrew from the accelerator program. The technology was still revolutionary, still viable, still mine. I called Professor Williams, expecting to leave another apologetic voicemail explaining why I couldn't continue my research. Instead, she answered on the second ring. "Marina. I was just thinking about you. How are you managing with everything?" "Dr. Williams, I need to ask you something honestly. When I withdrew from the accelerator program, did that invalidate my research? Is the technology still viable, or have I missed the market window?" There was a pause, followed by what sounded like surprise. "Marina, your technology is absolutely still viable. In fact, I've had 3 different aerospace companies contact me in the past month asking if I knew how to reach you. Apparently, word about your satellite guidance system has been circulating in industry conferences." My heart started beating faster. Companies have been asking about my work? North Star Aerospace, Precision Navigation Systems, and Quantum Satellites have all expressed serious interest in licensing your technology. I told them I'd lost touch with you after your family situation, but they asked me to contact them immediately if I heard from you again. I sat down heavily on my apartment floor, surrounded by unpaid bills and eviction notices, and tried to process what she was telling me. "Dr. Williams, are you saying there's still commercial interest in my research?" "Marina, there's enormous commercial interest in your research. Your satellite guidance system solves problems that the entire aerospace industry has been struggling with for years. The precision applications alone could revolutionize everything from agricultural irrigation to autonomous vehicle navigation." For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. Would it be possible to restart development work? Even without the accelerator program? Absolutely. In fact, independent development might be preferable at this point. You'd have more control over licensing negotiations and patent ownership. The accelerator program would have required you to share intellectual property rights. Working independently, you'd retain full ownership of your innovations. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Instead of spending my last $200 on rent that wouldn't prevent eviction anyway, I spent it on a bus ticket to visit North Star Aerospace's headquarters in Denver, Colorado. The 20-hour bus ride gave me time to prepare a presentation that would either save my future or represent the final, spectacular failure of my graduate career. I had no business cards, no professional wardrobe, and no scheduled appointment. What I had was breakthrough technology and the desperation of someone with absolutely nothing left to lose. North Star Aerospace occupied a gleaming office complex near Denver International Airport, the kind of building that screamed serious money and established success. Walking into their lobby wearing my only clean outfit, jeans and a sweater I'd bought at a thrift store, I felt like an imposter trying to infiltrate a world I didn't belong in. The receptionist looked at me with polite skepticism when I explained that I was there to discuss satellite guidance technology with their engineering department. "Do you have an appointment, miss?" "No, but I believe they've been trying to contact me about my research. My name is Marina Blackwood, and I developed the precision navigation algorithms that Professor Williams mentioned at the recent aerospace conference." Her expression shifted from skepticism to recognition. "Oh. Ms. Blackwood, yes, Mr. Chen has been hoping to hear from you. Let me see if he's available." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a conference room with David Chen, North Star's Vice President of Technology Development, explaining my satellite guidance system to someone who actually understood its revolutionary potential. "Ms. Blackwood," he said after reviewing my research data, "this is exactly what we've been looking for. Our current navigation systems have accuracy limitations that your technology could eliminate entirely. The applications for precision agriculture alone could be worth tens of millions in licensing revenue." Tens of millions? I tried to keep my voice steady, but the number was so far beyond my current reality that it felt fictional. "Conservative estimates, yes. But we'd be most interested in an exclusive licensing agreement that would allow us to develop commercial applications across multiple industries. Would you be open to discussing terms?" I thought about my family's dismissal of my space fantasies, their insistence that Connor's practical farming was more valuable than my theoretical research, their systematic destruction of my confidence and opportunities. "Mr. Chen, I'd be very interested in discussing terms. But I should mention that I'm currently in a position to make quick decisions about licensing agreements. I don't have complex family or institutional obligations that would complicate negotiations." He smiled. "That's refreshing. Many researchers come to us with tangled partnership agreements and shared intellectual property rights that make licensing negotiations nearly impossible. Independent inventors who own their technology outright are much easier to work with." As I sat in that conference room, discussing licensing terms that could transform my life overnight, I realized that my family's betrayal had accidentally given me something they'd never intended: complete independence and sole ownership of breakthrough technology. They'd stolen my inheritance to fund their agricultural expansion, thinking they were taking my only valuable asset. But they'd overlooked the fact that my most valuable asset was never the land Grandpa Sam left me. It was the mind he'd encouraged and the dreams he'd believed in. My family had systematically destroyed everything I thought I needed to succeed. But in doing so, they'd accidentally freed me to discover what I actually needed to succeed: my own innovation, my own determination, and my own willingness to bet everything on technology they dismissed as worthless fantasy. The catalyst moment wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was simply the recognition that the people who'd convinced me I was powerless were the same people who'd never understood my power in the first place. The licensing agreement with North Star Aerospace was signed 3 weeks later in a cramped coffee shop near the Denver airport, because I still couldn't afford a hotel room for extended negotiations. The initial payment was $150,000 for exclusive rights to my satellite guidance technology in precision agriculture applications, with royalties of 8% on all future sales and a performance bonus of $500,000 if their implementation exceeded accuracy benchmarks within 18 months. I signed those papers with the same pen I'd used to give away my inheritance, but this time my hands weren't shaking. This time, I was trading something I'd created for compensation I'd negotiated. The difference between theft and business, I realized, was consent and fair value. The first thing I did with the licensing payment was rent a proper apartment in Denver, close enough to North Star's headquarters that I could consult on their implementation process. The second thing I did was buy a reliable car to replace my failing Honda Civic. The third thing I did was something my family would never have understood: I enrolled in an advanced business management course at Denver University's continuing education program. If I was going to build something sustainable from my technology, I needed to understand not just the science behind innovation, but the business fundamentals that turned innovation into lasting success. My family had been right about one thing: I'd been naive about practical business applications. But instead of abandoning my dreams to accommodate that weakness, I decided to eliminate the weakness itself. The business course was taught by Professor Janet Morrison, a former aerospace industry executive who'd launched 3 successful technology companies before transitioning to academia. During our first meeting, she reviewed my licensing agreement with North Star and raised an eyebrow. "Marina, this is a solid deal for first-time licensing, but you've essentially given away exclusive rights to your most lucrative application market. Precision agriculture could be worth hundreds of millions in licensing revenue over the next decade." I needed immediate capital to continue development, I explained. And I wasn't sure how to value the technology properly. "Understandable, but let's make sure you don't repeat that mistake. What other applications have you identified for your satellite guidance system?" I pulled out my research notes, which had grown substantially since my meeting with North Star. Autonomous vehicle navigation, maritime shipping, emergency response coordination, surveying and mapping, construction equipment guidance, and military applications. But I don't have the business knowledge to evaluate market opportunities or structure licensing agreements effectively. Professor Morrison smiled. "That's exactly why you're here. Let's build your business acumen to match your technical expertise." Over the following 6 months, I developed skills I'd never imagined needing. Financial modeling, market analysis, intellectual property strategy, contract negotiation, and startup scaling methodologies. Professor Morrison introduced me to her network of industry contacts, patent attorneys, and business development specialists who helped me understand how to transform breakthrough technology into sustainable competitive advantage. The breakthrough came when I realized that my satellite guidance system wasn't just one technology, it was a platform that could be customized for dozens of different applications. Instead of licensing exclusive rights to individual companies, I could maintain ownership while providing specialized implementations for specific market segments. I established Celestial Dynamics as a consulting and technology licensing company, with myself as founder and CEO. The business model was elegant. I would retain ownership of the core technology while developing specialized applications for different industries, licensing implementation rights rather than exclusive access. My first major contract after North Star came from Precision Maritime Solutions, a shipping company that needed navigation accuracy for automated port operations. The implementation required significant modifications to my original algorithms, but the consulting fees were substantial enough to fund 6 months of independent research and development. Working 18-hour days from my apartment, I developed maritime-specific enhancements that improved navigation accuracy by 40% over existing systems. The success of that project generated referrals to 3 other shipping companies and 2 port authorities, creating a pipeline of consulting revenue that allowed me to hire my first employee. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to David Chen from North Star, was a former NASA engineer who'd left the space program to pursue private sector opportunities. She'd heard about my work through aerospace industry conferences and contacted me about potential collaboration opportunities. "Marina, what you've developed solves problems we've been working on at NASA for years," she said during our initial meeting. "The precision applications for satellite coordination and space station navigation could revolutionize orbital mechanics. Are you interested in consulting work, or are you thinking about something more permanent?" "I'm thinking about joining a company that's going to change the aerospace industry. From what I've seen, Celestial Dynamics has that potential." Sarah became my chief technology officer, bringing NASA-level expertise and a network of contacts that opened doors I couldn't have accessed independently. Together, we refined my satellite guidance platform and developed implementation strategies for markets I'd never considered. The military applications alone generated 3 consulting contracts worth over $200,000 each. Emergency response coordination systems led to partnerships with 2 state governments and a federal disaster management agency. Construction equipment guidance attracted interest from major manufacturers who wanted to integrate precision navigation into their machinery. Within 12 months of founding Celestial Dynamics, we had 8 active consulting contracts, licensing agreements with 6 companies, and a backlog of potential projects that would require expanding our team significantly. My technology platform was generating over $2 million annually in combined licensing fees, consulting revenue, and performance bonuses. But the real breakthrough came when I realized that instead of simply licensing my technology to other companies, I could use it as the foundation for developing proprietary products and services. Why sell navigation solutions to construction companies when I could create a comprehensive precision guidance service that charged subscription fees for ongoing accuracy improvements? I pitched this concept to Marcus Webb, a venture capital partner who specialized in aerospace and defense technologies. Marcus had been recommended by Professor Morrison as someone who understood both the technical complexities and market potential of advanced navigation systems. "Marina, what you're describing isn't just a licensing business," he said after reviewing my expanded business plan. "You're talking about creating a new category of precision navigation services. The subscription model could generate recurring revenue streams that make this significantly more valuable than traditional licensing approaches. The technology platform is robust enough to support multiple service offerings," I agreed. "And the market demand is clearly established through our consulting work. What kind of funding would you need to scale this into a full-service offering?" I'd spent months preparing for this question, working with financial consultants to model various growth scenarios and capital requirements. We'd need approximately $3 million for the first 18 months. That would cover technology infrastructure, team expansion, marketing, and operational scaling to serve 20 major clients simultaneously. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying my financial projections. "Marina, I think we can do better than $3 million. What you've built here has the potential to become a $100 million company within 5 years. Let's talk about series of funding in the $8 million range." $8 million. The number was so far beyond anything I'd imagined when I was facing eviction just 18 months earlier that it felt surreal. But unlike my family's manipulative offers, this represented fair compensation for value I'd created through my own innovation and effort. As I sat in Marcus's office, discussing funding terms that would transform Celestial Dynamics from a consulting business into a major technology company, I thought about Connor's dismissive comments about my space fantasies, and Dad's insistence that farming was more valuable than aerospace research. They'd stolen my inheritance to fund agricultural expansion that might increase their annual revenue by $50,000. Meanwhile, the technology they dismissed as worthless fantasy was about to secure $8 million in venture capital funding. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. The series of funding closed on a Friday afternoon in March, exactly 2 years after I'd signed away my inheritance in that farmhouse kitchen. $8.2 million deposited into Celestial Dynamics' corporate account, representing the largest technology investment round in Colorado aerospace history. The announcement made the front page of Denver Business Journal and earned mentions in TechCrunch, Forbes, and Aerospace Weekly. But the real breakthrough came 3 weeks later with a phone call that would change everything. "Ms. Blackwood, this is Admiral Jennifer Morrison with the Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Division," the voice on my office phone said with military precision. "We've been following your company's development of precision navigation systems, and we have a proposal that might interest you." I nearly dropped the phone. Pentagon contracts were the holy grail of aerospace technology: unlimited budgets, cutting-edge applications, and credibility that opened every door in the industry. "Admiral Morrison, I'd be honored to discuss potential collaboration. The Navy is launching Project Neptune, a classified initiative to develop autonomous submarine navigation for deep ocean operations. Current GPS systems are useless underwater, but our analysis suggests your satellite coordination technology could solve navigational challenges that have plagued submarine operations for decades." She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Ms. Blackwood, we're prepared to offer Celestial Dynamics a $47 million contract to develop submarine navigation systems based on your precision guidance platform. The timeline is aggressive, 18 months from contract signing to full implementation, but the applications could revolutionize naval operations." $47 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like discussing the distance between planets rather than actual money. But this wasn't just about funding. It was about validation at the highest levels of government and industry. "Admiral, that's an incredible opportunity. What would the development requirements involve? Adapting your satellite guidance algorithms for underwater environments, developing sonar-integrated navigation interfaces, and creating real-time positioning systems that function at depths up to 3,000 feet. We've reviewed your maritime consulting work, and our technical team believes your platform is uniquely positioned to solve these challenges. The irony was overwhelming. My family had insisted that practical farming was more valuable than theoretical aerospace research. Now the U.S. military was offering $47 million for technology they dismissed as worthless space fantasies. I signed the Pentagon contract the following month in a ceremony at the Department of Defense headquarters in Washington, D.C. The signing was attended by 3 admirals, 2 generals, the Secretary of Defense, and a dozen aerospace industry executives who suddenly wanted to discuss partnership opportunities with Celestial Dynamics. The business transformation was immediate and dramatic. Within weeks of the Pentagon announcement, I received acquisition offers from Lockheed Martin, $180 million, Boeing, $215 million, and Raytheon, $267 million. Each offer included retention packages, technology licensing agreements, and promises to maintain Celestial Dynamics as an independent subsidiary. But Dr. Sarah Chen convinced me to decline all the acquisition offers. Marina, selling now would be like selling Apple when they just invented the iPhone. Your platform technology is going to create multiple billion-dollar market opportunities. Why accept hundreds of millions when you could build something worth billions? She was right. The Pentagon contract had demonstrated that our technology could solve problems across every major industry. Autonomous vehicles, precision agriculture, maritime operations, military applications, construction automation, emergency response. The market potential was essentially unlimited. Instead of selling, we used the Pentagon contract as leverage to secure a Series B funding round. The numbers were staggering. $75 million in venture capital from a consortium led by Kleiner Perkins and including investments from Google Ventures, Amazon's Alexa Fund, and Boeing Horizon X. The company valuation reached $500 million overnight. Forbes featured me on their 30 Under 30 list in the aerospace category. Harvard Business School invited me to speak about technology entrepreneurship. The Aerospace Industries Association elected me to their board of directors, making me the youngest member in the organization's history. But the moment that truly marked my breakthrough came during a technology demonstration at the Pentagon in November. Admiral Morrison had invited senior military leadership to observe our submarine navigation system's first live test. The demonstration went flawlessly. Our technology achieved navigation accuracy within 18 inches at 2,500 feet underwater, compared to the previous system's accuracy of approximately 300 feet. After the demonstration, Admiral Morrison pulled me aside. Ms. Blackwood, in 30 years of military service, I've never seen technology that so completely revolutionizes operational capabilities. Your system doesn't just improve submarine navigation, it enables entirely new categories of underwater operations that were previously impossible. Thank you, Admiral. That's exactly what we hope to achieve. There's something else. The Pentagon is considering expanding this contract to include surface vessel navigation, aircraft carrier coordination systems, and battlefield logistics management. We're talking about a potential 5-year, $200 million contract expansion. $200 million in additional military contracts. The number represented more money than most technology companies generated in their entire existence. For a company I'd founded less than 3 years earlier with licensing fees from technology my family had considered worthless, it felt like vindication beyond my wildest imagination. That evening, I called Professor Williams to share the news about the contract expansion. Her response was everything I'd hoped to hear. Marina, what you've accomplished is unprecedented for someone your age in this industry. But more importantly, you've proven that breakthrough innovation comes from persistence and vision, not from following conventional wisdom or accepting other people's limitations. Professor, none of this would have happened without your support during the worst period of my life. When my family convinced me I was impractical and unrealistic, you maintained faith in the technology's potential. Marina, your family didn't understand what they were looking at. They saw satellite research and thought about space exploration. They couldn't envision the terrestrial applications that make this technology revolutionary. Their inability to recognize your innovation's value was their limitation, not yours. As I sat in my corner office overlooking downtown Denver, reviewing contracts and partnership agreements that would transform Celestial Dynamics into a major defense contractor, I thought about the farmhouse kitchen where my parents and brother had explained why my aerospace research was less valuable than Connor's agricultural expansion. They'd been so confident in their practical wisdom, so certain that land ownership was more valuable than intellectual property, so convinced that farming applications trumped satellite technology. Now my satellite technology was being used to revolutionize farming through precision agriculture contracts. The military applications they'd never imagined were generating hundreds of millions in government funding. The maritime systems they'd never considered were transforming shipping industry operations. Everything they dismissed as impractical fantasy was reshaping multiple industries simultaneously. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. The caller ID showed a number I recognized but hadn't seen in over 2 years, Connor's cell phone. I stared at the ringing phone, knowing that this call represented everything my breakthrough success had been building toward. My family had finally learned what I'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. For the first time since that devastating morning in the farmhouse kitchen, they wanted to talk. I let Connor's call go to voicemail, then listened to his message 3 times before I could fully process what he was saying. Marina, it's Connor. Look, I know it's been a while since we talked, but I saw the article about your company in Agriculture Today magazine. The precision farming applications sound incredible, and we could really use your help here at the farm. Things have gotten complicated, and I think there might be some opportunities for us to work together. Call me back when you get a chance. It's important. His voice carried a tone I'd never heard before, uncertainty mixed with something that sounded almost like desperation. The confident, dismissive brother who'd explained why my aerospace research was worthless compared to his practical farming experience was gone, replaced by someone who needed something from the sister he'd systematically betrayed. I didn't call him back immediately. Instead, I asked Dr. Sarah Chin to research what was happening in Millbrook Creek's agricultural sector. What she discovered explained everything about Connor's sudden interest in reconnecting. Marina, your family's farming operation is in serious financial trouble, Sarah reported after a week of investigation. They expanded aggressively using your inheritance money, but they made several critical miscalculations. She pulled up satellite images on her laptop showing Thornfield Farm's current state. They converted most of the property to organic certification, which requires a 3-year transition period with reduced crop yields. They invested heavily in premium equipment and processing facilities, but the organic market in rural Colorado turned out to be much smaller than projected. What kind of financial trouble are we talking about? Based on public records and agricultural lending data, they're approximately $800,000 in debt. The equipment loans alone require monthly payments they can't sustain with current revenue levels. They've missed 3 consecutive payments on their primary operating loan. $800,000 in debt. The same family who'd stolen my inheritance because they were practical, businesspeople who understood real-world applications, had somehow managed to lose more money than they'd stolen from me. There's more, Sarah continued. The organic certification process revealed soil contamination issues that require expensive remediation. Environmental Protection Agency records show they're facing potential fines of $200,000 for improper pesticide application practices dating back several years. So they're facing both debt crisis and regulatory violations? Exactly. And here's the ironic part, the precision agriculture applications they desperately need to solve their efficiency problems are exactly what your satellite guidance technology was designed to address. They need the very innovation they convinced you to abandon. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. Connor had dismissed my satellite research as impractical space fantasies while positioning himself as the agricultural expert who understood real farming challenges. Now those same farming challenges were destroying his business, and the solution existed in technology he'd taught me to devalue. I finally returned Connor's call 6 weeks later, after Celestial Dynamics had signed 2 additional military contracts worth $85 million combined. By then, I'd received several more voicemails from him, each one slightly more urgent than the last. Marina. Thank God you called back, he said, his relief palpable through the phone. I've been hoping we could talk about some business opportunities that might benefit both of us. Business opportunities? I kept my voice neutral, professional. What kind of opportunities? Well, your precision agriculture technology has gotten a lot of attention in farming publications. The articles mention that your satellite guidance systems can optimize irrigation, reduce equipment costs, and increase crop yields by up to 30%. That's correct. Our precision agriculture platform has been very successful with clients across multiple farming operations. Marina, I'll be honest with you. We've run into some challenges here at the farm. Expansion costs, equipment financing, some regulatory issues. You know how complicated modern agriculture can be. I was thinking that maybe there's a way we could partner on implementing your technology here. The word partner was interesting. Not help, not consult, but partner, implying some kind of equal relationship between the CEO of a $500 million technology company and a failing farm operation. Connor, Celestial Dynamics works with agricultural clients nationwide. What specific applications were you considering? Actually, I was hoping we could discuss this in person. Maybe you could come home for a visit? Mom and Dad would love to see you, and we could show you around the farm, explain what we're working on. I think you'd be impressed by the operation we've built. The invitation to come home was telling. Despite everything that had happened, despite the systematic betrayal and calculated theft, Connor apparently believed that family obligations still existed. That I would drop my business responsibilities to visit the farm where they destroyed my trust and stolen my inheritance. Connor, I appreciate the invitation, but I have a very full travel schedule. If you're interested in our precision agriculture services, I can have our business development team contact you with information about consulting packages and implementation timelines. Marina, this isn't just about business. We're family. I know things got complicated with the inheritance situation, but we've always supported each other's success. Now that you've done so well with your company, maybe there's a way for all of us to benefit from working together. The audacity was breathtaking. Things got complicated with the inheritance situation, as if my inheritance had been stolen by external forces rather than by him personally. We've always supported each other's success, as if he hadn't spent months explaining why my success was impossible and impractical. Connor, our business development team can provide you with consulting rates and implementation costs for precision agriculture services. Standard rates for farming operations your size typically range from $50,000 to $200,000 depending on the scope of work. There was a long pause. Marina, those are pretty significant costs for consulting work. I was thinking more in terms of a family arrangement. Maybe some kind of reduced rate pilot program, or a partnership where we share revenue from demonstrating your technology's effectiveness. Connor, Celestial Dynamics doesn't offer family discounts or pilot programs. We're a technology company, not a charity. But Marina, we're talking about the family farm. Grandpa Sam's land. This is where you grew up, where your technology could really make a difference for people you care about. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Invoking Grandpa Sam's memory and my childhood connections to extract business concessions from a company they'd forced me to build after stealing the resources he'd left me to pursue my dreams. Connor, Grandpa Sam's land belongs to you now, remember? You and Mom and Dad made that very clear when you restructured the inheritance arrangements. That land has nothing to do with me anymore. Another long pause. Marina, I know you're still upset about how that situation was handled. But we were trying to protect everyone's interests, including yours. Maybe now that you've been so successful, we could revisit some of those arrangements. And there it was. The real reason for his call. Not partnership, not family reconciliation, not genuine business interest. They wanted to revisit the inheritance theft now that my success had made it clear how badly they'd miscalculated my potential value. Connor, I'm not interested in revisiting anything. But I am curious about one thing. How's the farm expansion working out? Last time we talked, you were so confident about the business opportunities that would come from consolidating family holdings under responsible management. The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When Connor finally spoke, his voice had lost all its manufactured confidence. Marina, we've hit some temporary setbacks. Market conditions, regulatory changes, some equipment financing issues. Nothing that can't be resolved with the right strategic partnerships. Temporary setbacks requiring $50,000 to $200,000 in consulting fees to resolve? Marina, please. We're family. Can't we find a way to help each other? For the first time in our conversation, Connor's voice carried genuine desperation. The arrogant, dismissive brother who'd explained why my dreams were worthless was gone, replaced by someone whose own dreams were collapsing and who needed rescue from the sister he'd betrayed. Connor, you're absolutely right. We are family. And family members should always be honest with each other about business realities. The business reality is that Celestial Dynamics charges market rates for consulting services. If you'd like our help, our business development team can discuss payment arrangements. I hung up before he could respond, but I knew he'd call back. Desperate people always did. What I didn't expect was that his next call would come from Mom, and that her approach would be far more manipulative than his direct financial appeals. Mom's call came on a Thursday evening while I was reviewing contracts for a $120 million international expansion deal with the European Space Agency. Her voice carried the same manufactured warmth I remembered from childhood, but underneath it was something new, calculation mixed with barely controlled panic. Marina, sweetheart, I hope you're not still upset about Connor's call. You know how men can be, they're not always good at expressing emotional things. I wanted to reach out personally because I miss my daughter. The emotional manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Hello, Mom. How are things at the farm? Oh, farming is always challenging. But Marina, I didn't call to talk about business. I called because I've been thinking about you constantly. Seeing your success in the news, reading about your company, I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. Thank you. Honey, I know the situation with your grandfather's inheritance was difficult. Maybe we didn't handle it perfectly. But you have to understand, we were trying to protect the family's stability during a very uncertain time. Mom, the situation was handled exactly as you intended. You got what you wanted. Marina, that's not fair. We never wanted to hurt you. We thought Connor was better positioned to manage the agricultural aspects while you pursued your technology career. It seemed like a logical division of responsibilities. The revisionist history was stunning. They'd gone from calling my technology worthless space fantasies to claiming they'd always intended for me to pursue my technology career. From stealing my inheritance to protect family stability to suggesting it had been a logical division of responsibilities. Mom, Connor explained very clearly that my aerospace research was impractical dreaming compared to his agricultural expertise. You supported that assessment. There's no need to rewrite history now. Sweetheart, we never said your research was worthless. We just thought, we were concerned about the practical challenges of turning research into sustainable income. We wanted you to have financial security. And now? There was a pause that revealed everything. Now we can see that your instincts were absolutely correct. You've built something incredible, Marina. Something that could benefit everyone in the family. How would my company benefit everyone in the family? Well, honey, Connor mentioned that your precision agriculture technology could help modernize the farm's operations. And we've been thinking, maybe there's a way for the family to be more involved in your success. After all, we supported your education, encouraged your dreams, helped shape the woman who could build such an amazing company. The audacity was breathtaking. They were claiming credit for success they tried to prevent, asking to benefit from achievements they dismissed as impossible, and suggesting that their betrayal had somehow contributed to my current position. Mom, how exactly did you support my education and encourage my dreams? Marina, we paid for your undergraduate degree. We supported you through graduate school. We celebrated every achievement. Just because we had concerns about the business practicalities doesn't mean we didn't believe in you. You paid for my undergraduate degree with money that came from the farm operations. Operations that were funded by Grandpa Sam's investment in the land you later stole from me. You supported me through graduate school until the moment my research became valuable enough to threaten Connor's claim to family resources. Honey, that's a very harsh way to interpret what happened. We were trying to balance everyone's needs and interests. Mom, let me ask you something directly. Are you calling because you miss your daughter, or because Connor told you that the farm needs expensive consulting services that only my company can provide? Another revealing pause. Marina, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I do miss you terribly. But I also think there might be opportunities for us to help each other. What kind of help do you think I need? Well, sweetheart, you've built this incredible company, but you don't have family connections anymore. You don't have a place to come home to, people who knew you before you were successful. That kind of grounding is important for anyone, especially someone managing the pressures of running a major business. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated but transparent. She was offering me family connection and emotional grounding in exchange for financial assistance, as if my success had left me somehow incomplete without their approval and presence. Mom, I appreciate your concern, but I have a very strong support network. My business partners, my team, my professional relationships, I'm not lacking for people who value my contributions. But Marina, those are professional relationships. They value what you can do for them. Family loves you for who you are, unconditionally. Like when you loved me unconditionally enough to steal my inheritance. Marina, please don't use words like steal. We restructured family assets to protect everyone's long-term interests. And look how well things turned out. You've built something far more valuable than farmland ever could have been. So you're taking credit for my success? I'm saying that maybe everything happened for a reason. Maybe losing the land freed you to build something bigger than you ever could have imagined. The circular logic was maddening. They'd stolen my inheritance, nearly destroyed my life, and now wanted credit for the success I'd built despite their betrayal. But I realized something important. I no longer needed their acknowledgement of wrongdoing to feel vindicated. Their current desperation was acknowledgement enough. Mom, Connor mentioned that you might be interested in precision agriculture consulting services. Celestial Dynamics has a very efficient business development process for evaluating potential clients. Marina, we're not potential clients. We're your family. Mom, you made it very clear 3 years ago that family relationships and business decisions are separate things. You were right about that. So let's keep this business focused. But sweetheart, surely there's some consideration for family relationships. Some recognition that we've all contributed to each other's success over the years. What contribution are you thinking of specifically? Marina, we raised you. We supported your education. We encouraged your curiosity and intelligence. The foundation for everything you've achieved was built here, in this family. I looked out my office window at downtown Denver, thinking about the contrast between their current desperation and the confidence they displayed when dividing up my inheritance. Mom, you're absolutely right. The foundation for everything I've achieved was built in our family. Specifically, it was built on the land Grandpa Sam left me to fund my dreams. Well, yes, but the land you restructured away from me because Connor was better positioned to manage agricultural assets. The land that's now generating the debt crisis that requires expensive consulting services to resolve. Marina, please. We're not asking for charity. We're suggesting a mutually beneficial business arrangement. What would be mutually beneficial about it? You could pilot your technology on a farm where you have personal connections and detailed knowledge of the operational challenges. We could provide a case study for your marketing materials. It could be a win-win situation. Mom, Celestial Dynamics already has dozens of successful agricultural implementations that serve as case studies. We don't need to develop new ones, especially not at reduced rates. Marina, I don't understand why you're being so cold about this. We're your family. We love you. We want to find ways to support each other. Mom, you want financial support. That's different from emotional support. And financial support is something Celestial Dynamics provides to clients who pay for consulting services. So that's it? You're going to treat your own family like strangers? Mom, you treated me like a stranger when you stole my inheritance. You treated me like a business problem to be solved rather than a daughter to be supported. You established that family relationships are subordinate to business considerations. I'm just following the precedent you set. The silence that followed was the longest of our conversation. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth or manipulation. Marina, what would it cost for your company to help us save the farm? Standard consulting rates for agricultural operations facing financial crisis typically run between $150,000 and $300,000, depending on the complexity of the implementation and the urgency of the timeline. We don't have that kind of money. Then I suggest you contact other consulting firms to compare rates and services. Marina, please. The farm is going to be foreclosed within 60 days if we can't demonstrate improved operational efficiency to the lenders. We'll lose everything. Mom, you've already lost everything that mattered. You lost your integrity when you fabricated medical records to steal my inheritance. You lost your family relationships when you chose money over trust. You lost your business acumen when you made catastrophic expansion decisions. The foreclosure would just make the financial loss official. How can you be so cruel to the people who raised you? I'm not being cruel, Mom. I'm being practical. Just like you taught me. I hung up and returned to reviewing the European Space Agency contracts, but I couldn't stop smiling. The family who'd stolen my inheritance because they were practical businesspeople who understood real-world applications had just begged me to save them from the real-world consequences of their practical business decisions. The irony was perfect, but the vindication was even better. 6 months after my mother's desperate phone call, I received an invitation that brought everything full circle. The Millbrook Creek Chamber of Commerce wanted to honor me as their Distinguished Alumna of the Year at their annual fundraising gala. The irony was delicious. The same rural community that had watched my family steal my inheritance now wanted to celebrate the success I'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. I almost declined the invitation, but Dr. Sarah Chin convinced me to accept. Marina, you've transcended their limitations. Going back isn't about them anymore, it's about showing other young people from small towns that their dreams aren't limited by other people's narrow vision. She was right, as usual. My story had become bigger than family revenge or personal vindication. Forbes had featured me in a cover story about rural innovation, Harvard Business School had developed a case study about my company, and the state of Colorado had appointed me to their Economic Development Council. I'd become a symbol of something larger than my individual success. The gala was held at the Millbrook Creek Community Center, the same building where I'd attended 4-H meetings as a child and dreamed about becoming an engineer. Walking into that familiar space wearing a custom-designed evening gown and jewelry worth more than most people's annual salary felt surreal, like stepping between two different versions of reality. The entire town seemed to be there, including people I hadn't seen since high school. Former teachers who'd encouraged my interest in science, classmates who'd teased me about my weird fascination with satellites, neighbors who'd watched me grow up on the farm that no longer belonged to me. But the moment that defined the evening came when I spotted my family sitting at a table near the back of the room. Mom, Dad, and Connor, dressed in their best clothes but looking diminished somehow, older and more fragile than I remembered. They'd aged badly in the stress of financial collapse and business failure. During the cocktail reception, Connor approached me while I was talking with the mayor about potential technology partnerships with local schools. Marina, he said quietly, could I have a word with you privately? I excused myself from the mayor and followed Connor to a quiet corner of the room. Up close, the toll of the past year was even more apparent. His face was gaunt, his hands showed the calluses of someone doing manual labor, and his eyes carried the defeated look of a man who'd watched his dreams crumble. Marina, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but I need you to know something. The farm is gone. We lost it to foreclosure last month. Mom and Dad are living in a rental apartment in town, and I'm working at the grain elevator to pay off the remaining debts. I felt a complex mix of emotions, not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of cosmic justice. I'm sorry to hear that, Connor. The thing is, Marina, losing everything has given me a lot of time to think about what happened between us. About the inheritance, about the way we treated you, about the choices we made. What conclusions have you reached? That we were wrong. Completely, catastrophically wrong. Not just about the business decisions, but about you. About your potential, your technology, your value as a person and a professional. The apology I'd once desperately wanted to hear now felt almost irrelevant. Connor, I appreciate that acknowledgement. Marina, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve the chance to ask for it. But I want you to know that watching your success while our world fell apart taught me something important about the difference between intelligence and wisdom. What's the difference? Intelligence is knowing information. Wisdom is understanding people. We had all the information about farming, business, and financial management. But we completely failed to understand the most important person in our family, you. We couldn't see past our own limitations to recognize your potential. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but found only genuine regret and hard-earned humility. Connor, what are you going to do now? Start over, I guess. Try to become someone worthy of the sister I lost through my own stupidity and greed. He paused, then looked directly into my eyes. Marina, I know this doesn't matter now, but I need to say it anyway. Watching you succeed despite everything we did to undermine you is the most impressive thing I've ever witnessed. You didn't just overcome our betrayal, you used it as fuel to build something extraordinary. Thank you. And Marina? Grandpa Sam would be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. We stole his land, but we couldn't steal his legacy. You carried it forward in ways he probably never imagined. As Connor walked away, I realized that his acknowledgement, while meaningful, didn't change anything fundamental about my story. My success hadn't been built on a desire for their recognition or approval. It had been built on my own determination to honor the dreams that Grandpa Sam had believed in and that I'd refused to abandon. The formal program began an hour later, with speeches about community values, rural innovation, and the importance of supporting local talent. When they called my name for the Distinguished Alumna Award, the applause was genuinely enthusiastic, led by former teachers who remembered my childhood fascination with space exploration. My acceptance speech was brief but pointed. Thank you for this honor. I want to share something important with the young people in the audience tonight. Your dreams are not limited by other people's ability to understand them. Your potential is not defined by other people's willingness to support it. And your success is not dependent on other people's permission to pursue it. I paused, looking out at the audience that included my family, my former teachers, and dozens of teenagers who might be struggling with their own impossible dreams. 3 years ago, I left this community with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. People I trusted had convinced me that my dreams were impractical, my technology was worthless, and my judgment was flawed. But those people were wrong about me, just like people might be wrong about you. The most dangerous limitation you'll ever face isn't lack of money, lack of education, or lack of opportunity. It's accepting other people's limitations as your own truth. Your dreams belong to you. Protect them, develop them, and never let anyone convince you they're not worth pursuing. After the ceremony, I walked outside into the cool night air and looked up at the stars that had fascinated me as a child. The same stars that had inspired Grandpa Sam to encourage my impossible dreams and that now guided satellites powered by technology I'd developed. Dr. Sarah Chen joined me on the steps of the community center. How do you feel about coming back? Peaceful, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of that answer. For years, I carried anger about what they did to me. But tonight, I realized that their betrayal was never really about me. It was about their own fear and limitations. They couldn't see beyond their narrow definition of value and success. And now? Now I understand that the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so successful that their opinions become irrelevant. They spent 3 years learning that everything they believed about practical value and realistic dreams was incorrect. I spent 3 years building something that proves dreams are the most practical investment anyone can make. As we drove away from Millbrook Creek, I thought about the teenage girl who'd spent nights on that same community center steps, looking at stars and imagining a future that seemed impossible. She'd built rockets that never flew and calculated trajectories that led nowhere except to bigger dreams. But those impossible dreams had become satellite guidance systems worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Those impractical fantasies had become technology that revolutionized multiple industries. That naive farm girl had become a CEO whose innovations were reshaping aerospace engineering. The family emergency that had brought me home 3 years ago had cost me everything I thought I needed to succeed. But it had also freed me to discover everything I actually needed to succeed: my own innovation, my own determination, and my own refusal to accept limitations imposed by people who couldn't envision the possibilities I could see. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are simply preparing you for the success they could never achieve themselves. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to discover what you're actually capable of building. And sometimes, the best way to honor the people who believed in your dreams is to make those dreams so spectacularly successful that no one can ever question their value again. My grandfather's legacy lived on, not in the farmland my family had lost, but in the stars I'd finally learned to reach. That's a story worth remembering, worth sharing, and worth celebrating, because it proves that your biggest dreams are never too big if you're brave enough to pursue them despite everyone who tells you they're impossible. What dreams are you ready to stop apologizing for? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks. Tomorrow, I have another story that will remind you why the people who underestimate you are usually the people who help you the most. They just don't realize it at the time. Your dreams are waiting. Stop asking for permission to pursue them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.